All right, guys, we have some breaking news right now this morning, which is we got the very latest in terms of inflation numbers. And I'm reading now from Heather Long, Washington Post economics reporter, on what those numbers are. She says U.S. inflation hit 8.5% in March. That is the highest level since the end of 1981. It was a great year. That was the year I was born in. High gas prices accounted for half the March inflation spike. Gas prices peaked on March 11th. Rising food and rent prices also hurt. Wages were up 5.6% in the past year. And if you can do basic math, you can see that that does not even come close to keeping up with inflation. So we were prepped for this rather dire report that shows an extraordinary continued increase in inflation. It's really not too much of a surprise, given that on top of all of the issues we're already having with supply chain shocks and all the rent, corporate greed and all the rest, that you add on top of that now a war, which is causing increased gas prices, further increased food prices. We covered yesterday that world food prices have shot up to a historic high. And, you know, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that we're having these horrific inflation numbers coming out this month. Jen Psaki actually sort of tried to lay the groundwork for this yesterday in her own annoying little way. Let's listen to what she had to say.
So because of the actions we've taken to address the Putin price hike, we are in a better place than we were last month. But we expect March CPI headline inflation to be extraordinarily elevated due to Putin's price hike. And we expect a large difference between core and headline inflation, reflecting the global disruptions in energy and food markets. So core inflation doesn't include energy and food prices. Headline inflation does. And of course, we know that core inflation, energy, the impact of energy, of course, on oil prices, gas prices, we expect that to continue to reflect what we've seen the increases be over the course of this invasion. And just as an example, since President Putin's military buildup accelerated in January, average gas prices are up more than 80 cents. Most of the increase occurred in the month of March, and at times gas prices were more than $1 above pre-invasion level. So that roughly 25% increase in gas prices will drive tomorrow's inflation reading. And certainly it's not a surprise to us, but we certainly think it will be reflected.
The Putin price hike thing really annoys the crap out of me because
cringe.
It's so cringe to start with. And second of all, we're not stupid. I mean, we remember that inflation started long before Russia's war in Ukraine. Is it making the situation worse? Yes, but God, have some basic respect for the American people and level with them about what is actually going on here. One more piece of data that is significant about the inflation report, and this is from Neil Irwin, who's chief economic correspondent at Axios. He says the most worrying thing is that services, excluding energy services, are also up 0.6%, and that has accelerated that price increase each of the last 3 months. So he says even if durable goods and energy prices stabilize, that suggests real broadening of underlying inflation. So just to break that down a little bit, what has been driving inflation previously was not services because, people were locked down from COVID. And so they were using their money to buy things, goods. And that was part of what was driving up the prices. So the thought was, okay, well, once things sort of level out and we get these supply chain issues worked out, we can kind of stabilize again and inflation will go back down. But when you see services, those prices also starting to increase, that indicates you have a broader problem than just the supply chain issues. So all of this adds up to a very worrying situation, and it also means the Fed is going to be under more pressure to hike interest rates more quickly and to rid themselves, get assets off of their balance sheet more quickly, which also has a massive tightening effect. We talked to you last week about how their comments, even from the most dovish members of the Feds, essentially say they're going to be doing both of those things at a rapid pace. We found out the meetings from the last, the minutes from the last meeting when they hiked interest rates 0.25%, that there were a number of members who wanted to go further than that. So that's the other question, is with the Fed looking at this information, it makes it more likely that they tighten quicker, and that makes it more likely that they tip us into recession.
Yeah, and just to give you guys an idea, inflation is actually accelerating because inflation in February was up by 0.8%. In March, it was up 1.2% just in a single month. And if you think about how that compounds, from October, it was 0.9, then 0.7, then 0.6, then 0.6, then 0.8, now 1.2. As as it continues to escalate, you can just see the compounding effect of food price, gas price, now service price. Everything is going up. The food inflation is actually up 8.8%. That's the largest 12-month increase since the period of May 1981. And you combine that obviously with gas prices, and it's a total disaster. I mean, people are just getting continually hammered in such a destructive way when you consider that most Americans spend the vast majority of their income on housing, food, and gas. And when you have all three of those go up, 5.6 measly increase in wages, not gonna do a single thing. So look, we have big problems in this country right now. I mean, even on the gas price, part of the issue, and again, I know it's unpopular to talk about it, but crude oil prices have actually gone down. And yet, your gas price has not really gone down that much. The average price is still $4 a gallon. You know why? Gas stations actually make the most profits when oil prices fall. So a lot of people are keeping their gas prices high. Now look, am I gonna sit here and demonize some guy who's, convenience store owner or whatever? He's probably been hammered all throughout COVID, got wrecked, needs the profit. I get it. But I'm saying that on a broader structural level, we have a big problem here because the increase in these services inflation too, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this as too, Krystal. I've been hearing from people, if you want to get your house fixed or something like that, good luck. 40%, 50% increase. They could charge whatever they want. Cars, obviously the same thing. The amount of power that some of these people have and are using in order to increase price, even more so than inflation, makes it so that people are in a really, really tough bind right now because they're just not making more money, but everything costs more. And that really hurts a lot of people's household balance sheets, and it really affects quality of life. I mean, if there's a recession, you should remember that people die. Like, people kill themselves during recessions. People die out of lack of healthcare and, inability in order to afford certain types of medicine. They don't buy as nutritious food. Mental health suffers dramatically. Alcohol and drug use goes up. It's not a joke. It's really not.
Yeah, and part of the reason why the landscape is so distressing right now is because effectively the only economic tools we have at our disposal are the Fed, because Congress is so broken and unable to respond to literally anything. So you have to rely on the Fed to get inflation under control, which is obviously a massive issue for working people trying to make ends meet every single month. I mean, it is by far the number one concern for voters going to the polls and just for, ordinary families trying to survive. And the Fed's instruments are very blunt. And the Fed's instruments take a while for you to see the impact. So that means it's very easy for them to overshoot the mark. They're trying to bring in the economy for what they call a soft landing, okay? Meaning that you slowly tighten things up, and hopefully it sort of, gets inflation under control without triggering that recession. But that is no easy task, especially when during COVID, they went even further than they had gone during the financial crash of 2008. They acquired, through quantitative easing, an extraordinary amount. It's like 33% of GDP of assets on their balance sheet. And so it's not just a question of how quickly they raise interest rates, and a report like this will certainly push them towards hiking them a lot more quickly. But when you also are unwinding that balance sheet at a more escalated pace, that also has the equivalent effect of even further hiking interest rates. So that's why you're seeing more and more economists warning that we're heading towards recession. You're seeing more and more, people who we don't necessarily love, but who are definitely invested in the future of the economy. People like Jamie Dimon and others looking at this and saying, this is a very tough landscape. You've had massive asset price inflation, and it's a dangerous situation right now. It really, truly is. This inflation report, it's gonna hurt. Food prices being so high, gas prices continuing to be so high, wages not even close to keeping pace. And then you have this pushing the Fed towards more dramatic action, which could very well tip the country into recession. So it really is truly a pretty dire landscape, and we got a much better picture of it with this inflation report this morning.
Yeah, I feel really bad for a lot of working people out there.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.